prevent you from peeking moistly. Peeking moistly. 2 meters apart. Peeking moistly. Peeking moistly. 2 meters apart. Peeking moistly. I'm not another boy. These are the things we know. 2 meters apart. I've heard from medical experts. These are the things we know. To prevent you from peeking moistly. Peeking moistly. 2 meters apart. 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 Peeking moistly.
What a terrible image.
Wash our hands. Onto our elbows. These are the things we know. We know. If people want to wear a mask, that is okay. These are the things we know. To prevent you from peeking moistly. Peeking moistly. 2 meters apart. Peeking moistly. Peeking moistly. 2 meters apart. Peeking moistly. I'm not medical expert. These are the things we know. 2 meters apart. I've heard from medical experts. These are the things we know. To prevent you from peeking moistly. Peeking moistly. 2 meters apart. 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 Peeking moistly.
Hi everybody, good morning.
Morning, Leslie.
Good to see everybody.
Morning, Leslie.
Good morning.
Hey, Nate. Looking good.
I'll turn off all my media so I don't interfere with the presenter, but good to see you for a couple seconds. And thank you for organizing, Bobby.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Show, for offering.
My pleasure. Welcome, welcome, everyone. I don't see anybody in the waiting room, so perhaps if everybody's okay, we can get started. We are a small group, so if you would like to keep your videos running and that kind of thing, please do feel free. And also, because we are a small group, if you would like to ask questions simply by unmuting your mic, that's totally manageable. I do note though that as the groups get larger and larger, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But for today, you're more than welcome to do that. As we go through some of these different tools, if there's a tool that you see that we haven't demonstrated in any way, and you're wondering about it, please do feel free to ask. And at some point in all of this, we'll also create some breakout rooms so that you can feel what those are like. And with that, oh, we have one more person joining us. There we go. Hello. Okay, super. Great. Thank you so much for coming and for the opportunity to kind of deeply think about the tools that we use and how we can use them to engage students rather than sort of simply talk at them. I feel like we spent so much time learning and crafting our skills in the classroom, and now all of a sudden to have to think about how that translates to a more remote and technologically supported platform has been challenging. It's been pretty exciting though, because I think what we've realized is that many of the techniques that we use in the classroom can be converted to a more remote experience. I still don't feel as though it is as good or perfect. But I do think with a little bit of creative use of the technology, we can keep people engaged and learning as we do it from sort of more remote and disparate places around the world. So, synchronous remote teaching for large courses. Large, my understanding is within your teaching context, large is about 130 as a maximum, which is large. And definitely requires different technological solutions than a small or more intimate group like we are today. So what I'm going to demonstrate is some of the tools that are available through Zoom for large groups. And for Zoom, a large group is up to 300. And there are some parameters, limiting parameters on that 300, but for the most part, it's pretty good. And the reason why there's a limiting of 300 is because the university's license currently doesn't allow us to invite more students than 300 at a time. It is possible to get larger licenses, and if you would like to join me in, here's my plug, in trying to mobilize the university to get larger ones, that would be great, because my current teaching context for a large class is 600. And so I'm a little bit stressed right now as to how we're going to do it, but I think your teaching context is good for that. We'll show you how to record the session. So I am currently recording this session. I'll talk a little bit about live chat. I'll show you Menti. We'll play around in breakout rooms and maybe talk a little bit about what your setup is going to look like for fall 2020. So, large classes. Here's just a tool that I'd like to show you for how you can get students to annotate your slide in a meaningful way. And so students have learned how to sort of write graffiti on your slides. Here's one way is you can ask them a question where there's some kind of spectrum, and you can get them to place a stamp on that spectrum. So my question to you is, what is a large class? And in order to be able to participate in this slide, please go to your View Options tab, and that's at the top of the shared screen. Select the menu Annotate, and from there you'll get a bit of a bar that comes across. If you select the Stamp tool, you can place a stamp on the range that I've got here at which a class feels large. So why don't you go ahead and try that. There we go. The whole span. I like that one, from 150 to 600. Excellent. Cool. I think most of you are there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, excellent. Okay. So this is a really, really fun tool that you can use, and you can use it in different ways. And so I'll show you a little bit about how you might be able to creatively use this stamp tool. Here we go. So what I'll do is I'm going to clear the screen, and actually what you can do is save each screenshot. Just by going up to the toolbar as the host, you can go to save the screenshot. But for now, I'm going to clear all drawings, and I'm going to say, I'm in Guelph, where are you? And if you wouldn't mind using your stamp tool to indicate where you are. If this map doesn't represent your current location, what you can do is, instead of the stamp tool, you can use the text tool to write in the box where you might be. So if you are, hopefully there's somebody from somewhere else, or if you'd like to just experiment with the text tool, please feel free to go ahead. Great. One of the challenges associated with using the text tool in a larger group is that it is difficult to kind of prevent the text from overlapping. So if two of you were to start writing and you were to write something, say, right underneath somewhere else, so I'm in Hamilton, or actually Hamilton is part of this, so I'm in Halifax, and then somebody wrote on top of it, it would start to kind of pile up. And that might be difficult. With a small group like what we have now, it's perfect to use the text annotate, but it does get a little bit busy when we have a larger group. Okay, so I see that we are mostly in the GTA area. There we go, Brampton, Toronto. I don't know what's under there directly, but somewhere between Vaughan and Brampton, couple in Guelph, and Cambridge. Super. Great. So I'm going to clear that again, all drawings, and we'll move on to the next slide. There we go. You can also get students to engage in sort of graphical representations of data. You can ask them personal questions about where they are to kind of teach them a little bit, become familiar, how to become familiar with XY axes, for example. But you could put some sort of discipline-based axes here in order to get them to make predictions or to guess a little bit about what that relationship might be. So for our purposes, I've got you thinking a little bit about your tech savvy. So how tech savvy are you relative to the available resources in terms of time, in terms of money available to buy digital equipment, and what that relationship might be. So are you extremely tech savvy with lots of resources? Are you not so tech savvy with lots of resources, or the opposite? Okay, there we go. In a teaching context for my students, I ask them to plot a prediction. So an XY relationship, time, and let's say hormone concentration. And using the annotate, you can get them to draw lines, for example, and to annotate this particular slide. And then you can superimpose the answer, the actual figure, to see whether or not they were able to make predictions that made sense based on the hypothesis. Wonderful. Okay, so resourcing seems to be fairly good for you, which is great. One of you is very tech savvy, and if at some point you'd like to identify yourself and maybe serve as a bit of a resource for other people, that would be great. But resourcing seems to be fairly good, and level of tech savviness or identified tech savviness seems to be pretty low, but I'm going to guess that it's a relationship between the more you learn about tech, the more you realize you don't know. Because I would also not consider myself to be tech savvy, though I am learning and using these tools in an effective way in order to be able to teach. And so in that respect, I guess we probably, most of us are. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a little bit about some other sort of behind the scenes outside of Zoom tools that you might be able to use to help, especially with the larger classes. So if you'd like to, please, if you've already done this, opened up a web browser with www.menti.com. That would be great, and that will bring you to a screen that will ask you to insert a code. Now, just let me confirm. Sometimes they change up the code on us as we launch these things. So you do have to, if you're going to use Menti, you do have to check to make sure that the code is the same. Yeah, they've changed the code. So the code is 15874. 15874, and I'm going to go back and launch this particular question. The question is, what words come to mind when I say remote learning? So just to revise the instructions, it's to go to www.menti.com. and to type in the code 15874. Okay, there we go. Excellent. That's great. I'm already starting to see answers. One of the tricks that you probably don't, you want to make sure that you do is to not show the answers as they're unfolding, as students are answering. What that would look like is, for example, if you shared your screen directly like this, and then as it was being updated, it was actively showing what the students were answering. And the reason why you don't want to do that, lesson learned, is that some students will write some silly things and some funny things. And then if other students see that they've responded that way, they will then respond in the same way, which will kind of inflate that particular silly answer that's not relevant to the question that you're answering. So what you want to do is you want to, kind of put it aside, gather all of the information, and then screen share with your students. So that it represents a little bit more of a relevant answer. Of course, if you want them to have some fun with it, then please go for it. They'll figure out how to do it. But here, I'll just show you what you're answering and what the response or the results look like. This is using Menti, and you can create a free account for up to two different questions at a time. So you can insert 2 questions within each class, for example. Unless you upgrade, of course, to a more, a professional license. It's not that expensive, but I operate within the free world. So this is what it looks like, and I have it set for a word cloud, which means that the more frequently the same word is used, obviously, the larger it is represented within the cloud. So many of you have said online, which is great. These are single responses. Technology, stressful, I hear you. Self-disciplined, excellent point. Yes, it does require quite a bit more self-discipline. Both, actually, I'm learning on the instructor side as well as the student side. Overwhelming, intimidating, self-motivation also falls in line with self-discipline for sure. There we go. Self-paced, excellent. Videos and all of these things, and so you can use this as a kind of a bridging tool for students if you want them to, if you're going to be teaching a new concept, you can get them to kind of dig deep into their minds and do a word association of what they already know or think about when they think about that concept. You can throw up words, like equity or inclusivity or whatever it is that you're going to be teaching about, and get them to start creating these links to parts of their brain. And the word cloud does that very, very well. Okay, so that's that one there. The next question that I've got for you is, why synchronous? And so in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply pass to the next slide on the Menti, where I've prepared this question. And now you should get the option to put in text as well. Small, short answer questions. What are the advantages of synchronous remote teaching? So go ahead and see if you can come up with any of those. Okay, so I'm starting to see some excellent answers that are going to cover all of it pretty much. So well done. Wonderful. Okay, super. So here's what it looks like. You can have it display the answers in several different ways. Here's the one that I've chosen. It's the one that works for me, where it kind of scrolls through and then everybody can read, maybe not all of them, but most of them. And it also gives you, as the instructor, a bit of an understanding about what the general trends are. So what I see here is the idea that it supports the notion of creating a routine. being able to stick to a schedule, kind of needing to be accountable to a certain time and a certain kind of place with a group of people, for sure, definitely. I like the comment that it adds a personal touch, and I hope that you can feel that in a way that you might not get from watching a YouTube video, where you know that everybody's kind of together, kind of in the same room. and for me, it makes a major difference. Live discussions can happen, especially in a smaller group context. Having in-class experience, higher student engagement, better for monitoring, getting feedback from students about their learning, right? If you put on Menti questions that are multiple choice, you can actually get them to tell you what they've learned and those types of things. So it's all a really positive experience. What we do think, though, is that use all of these advantages of Synchronous. And if you're not going to be doing that, if what you're trying to do is simply just, get through some concepts that they need to know, then really think about using an asynchronous tool. Think about making a video and posting it, rather than, getting everybody to come together, because you want value for that. And if you're not planning on specifically engaging students, then you don't need to be doing the synchronous part. Save the synchronous time for all of these really good ideas that you've got here. I hope that makes sense. Great. Okay. So, March. Do you remember March? I kind of feel like we need a moment of silence for March because March was hard. March was so difficult. And we were given just a few days to be able to try to figure things out. And for many of us, me included, it required learning all of these new tools, figuring out which tools worked best for me, and then, making a request for access to these tools and doing all of these things. And it was a mad scramble of stress. Which of course we still have this summer. It's not like we have all the time in the world, but certainly we can learn from March and move on. So my March probably looked a little bit different than yours because we were teaching a class of 900 students, and it was divided up into 2 sections, and there were 2 instructors. And we don't sort of divide and conquer when we co-teach. What we do is we teach both sections together. We're in the room together in a very kind of collaborative, different kind of model. And that actually made this massive shift to remote learning quite a bit easier, if not a little bit more fun, a little less lonely because of the co-instructor nature. So what we ended up doing was when we were teaching synchronously, one of us would be where I am right now, and then the other one would actually be on a separate laptop signed into CourseLink, monitoring a live chat. And the reason why we decided to keep the chat to CourseLink only was for 2 reasons. First of all, as the host of this part of the teaching, it is virtually impossible to be monitoring a live chat. So if you are chatting with each other right now, please do feel free, but I can't really engage in that conversation in a way that's helpful as the host of this synchronous event, right? So my co-instructor would be doing that, and then we would swap. So if it was his time to be teaching, then I would get onto the chat and actively engage, and students were really engaged in the chat. In a fun way, right? They posted silly things, they asked real questions, and it was a way of being able to encourage that sense of community without being stressed about it happening as you're trying to teach. So obviously our situation is different because we did have those 2 instructors, and we'll talk a little bit about how you might be creative about allowing for that second person, that kind of co-host. I know that that's a lot. But maybe we can come up with an answer. We also had to create an overflow room of basically tagging on Zoom license after Zoom license after Zoom license. It was complex. And we may actually have to do that again. The overflow room is not inclusive and it is not accessible. And so that's a major problem associated with it. But we did have to do it then. And I would be very disappointed if we have to do it again, but we may have to. Okay. So what did it actually look like? We recorded our screen as I'm recording the screen now. And in that orange box that you see at the top of your screen where it says leave this available, I've dropped my video feed onto it in a way that works for me. Some people use Zoom recordings. I'm not fully familiar nor comfortable using it, and I've learned how to use something called Screencast-O-Matic. And in order to get all of those things kind of together, this is how we've brought it all together. So just to kind of show you what it looked like for students in March, here's an example of us. You can see we're sharing a screen. We're taking them into a GigaPen, which is a high resolution image. You can see that we're up here at the top. We've learned to make that box bigger. So you'll see that I've done it when you see the recording of what we're doing. But we're teaching, and we're bringing them into these high-resolution images to show them all of these creatures in a way that we would have done in our big lecture hall as well, right? So that's what March looked like. What we learned from March is that it really has nothing to do with the technology. If you can comfortably use the technology, it is more about what you say and what you do. Obviously, the technology allows you sometimes to do a lot more, but there are ways of engaging meaningfully with students and making them feel like part of a conversation or a dialogue that is rather tech independent or just requires simple tech in order to do it. So our students were quite happy in March. Our fall 2020, we're really trying to be actively lobbying the university to get these larger Zoom licenses because we do feel like it is the best one. So hopefully that will come through. But we are going to stick with the same tech setup for the most part. The Google Slides, the Menti, the D2L chat, and the Screencast-O-Matic for recording, and then posting everything to YouTube as well. We like to use Google Slides because of the closed captioning down at the bottom happens in real time, but there are other apps that students can download in order to have closed captioning in real time. We just feel as though it is our responsibility to provide that, not theirs, and so we use Google Slides because it works for us. So we'll still do the same level of sharing with our students. We're looking at using some green screen technology, but we're not really sure if we're going to be able to develop that before we all go live in September. And we're going to bring in our TAs to the conversation as well, as much as possible, to be hosting these small group discussions of our class of 600. Your fall 2020. So what I'd like to do is to take this opportunity to show you a little bit about breakout rooms and how they work. So in order to do that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to create some breakout rooms. Now to do that, I'm still recording, which means that if you watch the YouTube video, you should be able to follow how I'm going to do this. If you need any help. But if you're the host of an event in Zoom, you can go to breakout rooms. And it will tell you how many participants there are. So there are 10 of you. And what I'd like to do is to put you into groups of 3 or 4. So I will create 3 rooms. And it will automatically and randomly assign you. You'll get an invitation to join a room, and then 3 or 4 of you will magically appear in your own Zoom discussion room. Now, the limitation on Zoom is 50 rooms, maximum of 50 rooms. So if you're teaching 600, it's not going to work if you want to have an intimate conversation going. But if you're teaching a class of 100, then it definitely works. You can create groups of 3 or 4. 2 can be a little bit awkward for students if they don't know each other, so you may want to kind of increase participation a little bit. What I'd like you to discuss in your rooms is what technology tools you're planning to use or you're hoping to use for the fall. And if you know of any cool one that you think other people don't, then please do feel free to kind of share, but mostly just to experience what a breakout room feels like, okay? I can send messages to you, and I'll do that just to kind of show you that I can prompt you to kind of stay on topic. Please don't feel like you have to for today. You can go ahead and unmute your mics and show your video if you'd like for this.
I'm finding, a little bit of a challenge, but getting there so far.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Great. So the other thing that you can do as the instructor is join a room. And
Creep people out.
yeah. And so you might want to warn them in the future, but I just wanted to check in and say that I'll close the rooms in just a couple of minutes. Bye.
I'm gonna do. Hi, Shoshana.
Hello.
I decided that I'm gonna do like Tuesday live teaching and then Thursday pre-recorded with like a tutorial for an hour.
Yeah. See, that's what initially with Agnes and I were talking, and I think get a load of this. So in the fall, my lecture is at 8 o'clock in the morning. How many kids are going to really do that? So I thought that's my lecture, which I'll probably do like PowerPoint voiceover or something. And then I have a lab prep on Tuesday, like in the middle of the day. So I think I might do that one live. And then I have labs where I got to figure out, you know,
And Zoom definitely has the dial-in.
Yeah.
I have people Zoom all the time dial-in, and if that's what GH is going to be using, is Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah, and Teams does as well. So you can dial into a meeting via Teams.
So that's a backup.
Yeah.
Teams is limited just because you can only see 4 people at a time.
Yeah, I found there's several limits. Like it's a meeting platform. I don't think it's really like a presentation platform. I'm sure they're going to catch up because they see the success of Zoom and Google. But yeah, that might take time.
Great, welcome back. So it does take a little while because what Zoom does is it gives you a 1-minute countdown, and you have chosen to leave your room, but others haven't quite yet. So it takes 1 minute and then Zoom shuts everything down and very sort of abruptly brings you back into the main room. So you have to wait about a minute. There we go. And then we have 5 more seconds before it will slam the door on breakout room number 3 and bring Agnes, Nathan, and Rob to us. There we go. Great. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay. So, breakout rooms are amazing. And here we go. Just close everything down. Oh, a question. Can I ask you a question? What is the difference between Menti and polling on Zoom? Okay, so let me show you what polling on Zoom feels like. Okay, I've got one that's already prepared. So both Menti and Zoom need to have pre-prepared for the most part. It's really complex to do it kind of on the fly, but here's one that I've got that I can launch to you. So you should get this on your screen. How tech savvy are you? You can do it in multiple choice, and you can select here. And for multiple choice questions and other sort of format questions that Zoom and Menti have, either of them is totally fine. I do find that Menti has some more creative ways of displaying their data, but I haven't really explored the far reaches of the Zoom platform as well. And so for short answer type questions and word questions, I do tend to default to Menti. But for multiple choice types of questions, Zoom is totally good. Unless you're going to be grading them, and then you have to come up with some kind of course link integrated type of a scenario. So just to show you, we've done the polling, and I can end the polling, and now I can share the results. And so you can take a look at what that looks like. And it's completely, to me, it's completely accessible and useful. So having those available is definitely a good option. There we go. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again, and back to pinning my video to that box so that we're recording with my face available to be seen along with the slides. Great. So there are other ways. If you are going to be using the Zoom chat in a kind of engagement activity, so you're asking students a question, you would like them to share a short answer question, you're not using Menti, for example, some students find it rather difficult to share because of the lack of anonymity associated with the Zoom chat. So what you can do is ask them to change their username to the word anonymous or to a common word. You can say, everybody change your name to cats. And that way they can stay anonymous and contribute within the Zoom platform in an anonymous way. In order to do that, what you can do is find your video feed or your Zoom feed, whether you're showing video or not. Click on the 3 dots and select rename. And you can rename yourself to something common. So I've suggested anonymous. You can make it silly if you want. And then when you go in to contribute a chat, what you'll see is that it will show that somebody called Anonymous is contributing, which means that students can now give you feedback. Maybe you want to do a start, stop, continue or something. You want to get some feedback where you don't necessarily want them to think that you know who they are. It works really well. So if you want to think of play with this tool, go ahead and change your name to Anonymous temporarily. And if you'd like, in the chat, you can include an answer to the question, what can you do to share some of your personality with your students to increase engagement? So what kind of little games or little activities can you do in order to share some of that personality, that important sort of community building aspect of yourself with the students? And as you're doing that, I'll just share that one of the things that we realized and why we asked this question about personality or about sort of your more sort of personal life, and you know, we tend to be a bit reluctant to share anything until I realized that we actually share a lot when we teach face-to-face with our students about who we are. They see our funky coffee mugs or our silly socks, or they see us walking in on crutches, or they see us, you know, with the sniffles, although I guess for the next little while, seeing us with sniffles is going to be like a big taboo. But they get all sorts of this nonverbal information that's communicated from our bodies in a way that we can almost block when we teach remotely. And I think it's really important to recognize that aspect and also to share some bits of information about ourselves as we're actually teaching. So I don't see any contributions under the anonymous on the side, and that's fine. But some ideas that you can do, and some things that we've seen. Oh, can anyone change their name? Oh, are you having difficulty changing your name? Does somebody want to unmute their mic and tell me what's going on?
Yeah, sorry, Joe. I tried to do that. Click on the 3 dots. I don't have a rename option.
You don't have the rename option. Does nobody have the rename option?
No. And where's the 3 dots?
So, are you talking about like your little video
Yes.
thing? Yeah. So I have like mute 3 dots. So it says mute, stop, pin, hide self.
Oh my goodness.
I don't have a rename option. Interesting.
That is completely surprising to me. Okay, so something's up, and that's weird because I have it, and in the other demonstrations that I've given, it has been available, but you are looking in exactly the right place. So there is a problem associated with something. So what I'll do is I'm showing it right now on the screen that I'm recording, and I can rename you, Rob. So it probably has something to do with the privileges, and this is something, and I'm super surprised by it, but I probably didn't check something off somewhere. The privileges you have to make sure are set for what it is that you want to do, and clearly something has gone wrong in this case. What you should have been able to do is to go and rename, and I can do it. So Rob, I'm going to name you Anonymous. There you go. Okay. But so that's a privileges glitch. That's totally my bad. But that's how you would do it. So it's weird though, because
it looks like Serge figured it out because his name's Jackson. Or is that?
Okay. So can some of you do it? Is that?
No, Serge, I bet logged in with like his kid's name.
Ah, okay.
Where I am, buddy. I'm trying to figure out how to go back now, and I can't do it.
Oh, look. Okay. So some of you can do it. Okay. So. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a difference using the app versus the web version?
Ooh, I have no idea. There are differences. Yeah. There are differences.
Or the iOS version too?
Can we talk about the different versions of Zoom? Because I just did the download simple way, and am I supposed to upgrade it?
Yeah. So questions about Zoom and the different privileges. There are different sort of license levels for sure. And the University of Guelph, if you poke them, will, if you're teaching in the fall, will issue pro licenses for up to 300 students. I'm not sure exactly what the limitations of that sort of open invitation are. And I do find that you need to be maybe a little bit more dramatic than you would normally and insistent in order to get them. And I'm being like even more pushy trying to get this 1,000, but they do have sort of different levels of functionality depending upon the level that you've got. Agnes, you had a question.
Yes, I just want to add that it is my understanding that if you are teaching a course at the University of Vancouver, you will have access to this. And if for some reason you don't, then please let me know or let Bobby know. And it's Victoria, Bobby that we need to contact. And we will have access for all our instructors.
Oh, that's delightful. That's wonderful and important. So with a pro license, that's what I'm using right now. You'll have basically all of the tools that you need for up to 300 students.
Yeah. Is that compatible with the students if they're just doing the download from the internet version?
Yeah, so students don't need to have a Zoom profile or account in order to be able to join. There is some benefit to it though. So for example, if you were to create breakout rooms and everybody had a Zoom profile, you could create pre-designated, pre-built breakout rooms. So if you were, for example, getting students to work in groups throughout the entire semester, and every time you did a breakout room, you wanted them to go into their designated groups, if they all had Zoom accounts, then that would be really easy to do. You can designate breakout rooms manually though, and without everybody having a Zoom account, you'd have to kind of, put those together as each time. So that's one of the differences between having a Zoom account and not.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
So when I was working on teaching a course right now, and when I was working on it, students tried using Zoom and then it crashed with the breakout room. I have it from another company that I do consulting with. They gave me a license, so I borrowed it for that one class because it wasn't working on the course link.
Oh.
Okay. And so I used it, and then it crashed, and then one of the students said it happened in another class they were in for the bridge program, and it has to do with people not updating their Zoom, like Zoom has updates, so if you don't update it, it doesn't break out or rooms are not working. So I created a FYI, please create an account and update.
Yeah, and I remember that time where they were throwing updates at all of us. I remember exactly when that was happening. But so far, since then though, have you had any challenges with it?
This was last week.
Oh goodness! I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
I have a class in 2 hours.
Oh my, okay. Yeah, So update, and it's always that way. Like, remember when you get to your lecture hall or your classroom and you open up your computer and Windows is updating just as you're trying to like launch your slides or something? Yeah. So yeah, always a good idea to make sure. And there will be technology fails, right? Hopefully not more frequently than what we have in our classrooms regularly, but those things happen. Yeah, and they're frustrating. Cool. Great. Okay. So it's actually question time. So what I'd love for you to do is to unmute your mic, join us by video if you'd like, there's a little bit of time left if you want to talk to each other, if you want to tell me what you felt in the different tools or anything that you noticed. The one thing that I will say is, from our experience, students love breakout rooms. And as an instructor, they are really disconcerting because you're not teaching, right? You're not engaging with students. But they're busy. So I jumped into each of your breakout rooms and you were all talking and sharing and working on the building of community stuff that we all talk about being so important with our students. And so I'm teaching a course right now. I've got pre-assigned breakout rooms. The students are becoming friends. They're sharing things outside of class time in a way that they wouldn't be able to do if it was just kind of everybody in the same room all the time. So breakout rooms, to me, if I had to pick one engagement tool, is actually the one where I'm least important, and students really, really like them. So anyway, please, we have about 10 minutes. If there's anything that you'd like to talk about, either with me or without me, please feel free to do that.
So I have a question. So if you're recording a live session, okay, for one, is there a way for me to actually save a file then once of the recording? Do I post a link, or what do I do? What am I doing there?
Yeah, so we're recording right now, and so when I'm done with this session, what I'm going to do is it's going to render the file and do all of those things. It takes about 10 minutes and create like a big video file. You can share that with students in a bunch of ways. The way that we've chosen to do is to upload it to a YouTube channel. And there's an advantage because after a little bit of time, YouTube will close caption as well, which can be a little bit better than the Google Slides in the moment closed captioning. So for accessibility purposes, we like to upload it to YouTube because they add that closed captioning feature. Other ways to do it are, and then we put the link on CourseLink, and then students can go to the YouTube channel and see it. Other ways include, uploading it to OneDrive and sharing it with your class. You can create a Teams of your class, and you can keep those files there with the links, all sorts of other ways of doing it. But I like the YouTube interface because students know how to use YouTube in a way that, that they're familiar with it.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say that YouTube video has to be public, right? Because I was dealing with it. Oh, it can be private?
Yes, it can be private.
So how do the students see it? Because when I had the students video practical exams on YouTube and they sent it to me, they made it private. I couldn't view it, so I just had to email them, and they had to make it public, but then, of course, it's public.
Yeah. So there are different levels of sharing abilities within YouTube. You can share links, for example. You can invite. You can have them subscribe. There are different ways that they can access that more sort of protected information that works quite well.
Okay.
If you want sort of the ultimate in privacy, though, then what I would do is I'm reluctant to upload an actual video to CourseLink, just because CourseLink for me doesn't manage videos well. It doesn't sort of manage large data files well for me. But you could certainly within Teams or within some kind of University of Guelph platform create a whole team of your course, and then everything can kind of stay within one area.
And about Google Slides, if I, for example, recorded a lecture at home,
yes,
and is there a way for me to close caption that lecture somehow using Google Slides? Or
yes.
does it have to be like, is there only a certain program that it will do that with?
No, Google Slides has a function. If you'd like, I can show you exactly how to activate that. It's really quite simple. So basically, what I did was I activated. I transferred my PowerPoint slides to Google Slides. It's not the easiest. It's clunky. It takes a little bit of time. But for the mass scramble pivot in March, this is what we did. We just, brought the slides over, put them into Google Slides. This particular presentation I built in Google Slides because I happen to like the program. But anyway, all you do is, so if this is your first slide and you want to present, you go into presenters mode, very similar to PowerPoint in terms of the way it looks. But then down here at the bottom, can you see this menu bar? Okay, you can see captions. Turn on captions. And it will now close caption everything that I say, irrespective of what I might have even on top of this slide. So if I wanted to have a slideshow going, but I also wanted to, show you some other media, here I've got a PDF that I can show you. You can still see that I've got the closed captioning going down at the bottom, and I can show you my PDF. It's quite nice that way. If you just keep Google Slide Presenters View open, it will monitor. But because I'm sharing my screen with you and not my window, I can place anything on top of that, and it will still close caption what I'm saying.
And will the recording have your PDF?
Yes, it will, because I'm recording the screen and not the window. That's an important distinction. You'll make the mistake once, and then you'll be like, oh yeah. So you have to make sure that you share the screen and not just that single window.
And will the recording have people's faces like our Zoom videos?
Only when I slide over. So as I'm sliding, so what I've done now is I've shared my screen and I've taken my Zoom window of your faces and put it on the screen that I'm recording. And so now, yes. And then when I slide them over to my other monitor, no.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one thing about the sharing screen function for Zoom is you share your screen, but if something within the Zoom world, like the videos, are on that screen, it doesn't necessarily project those, but it shows all of the other media and things like that.
If you are doing, if you're doing any short versions or like a pre-recorded lecture for just getting through material, I've been doing screen share, like sort of like recording of my screen to just record it. Could I also launch Google Slides as a presenter and do the caption and just record the file, or do I have to only do it on Zoom?
So that's interesting. Yes. So I use Zoom in order to get the video feed of myself, right? Okay. You can also do recordings within Zoom only, not using Screencast-O-Matic that I use, and that's totally fine. So Screencast-O-Matic is like the least important accessory technology that I've shown you here. You can record in Zoom, and that way you get your face and your slides all together. So what I would suggest is that you play around with it and figure out which way you'd like to do it. Maybe start with using Zoom as your recording. Maybe it doesn't record to the definition that you want, or maybe it makes the files too big or whatever. So definitely practice and see what it looks like. It will, in that case, you don't need to have the orange box of like dead space on your slide, because Zoom will put your face beside the slide in a way that's already stacked so that it doesn't overlap or interfere. So definitely play around with it and decide. If you don't like the Zoom recording, then I would use Screencast-O-Matic.
How much does Google Slides cost? Is there a price for it?
No, it's absolutely free.
What is it?
Yeah, it's totally free. And Screencast-O-Matic, in order to make videos that are more than 15 minutes long, recordings that are more than 15, it's I think about $20 or $25 in order to get the upgraded version. But like I said, that one's the least important if you're happy to use Zoom recordings.
You brought up a good point. Does Zoom have a limit on time of recording lectures?
No, not that I've seen. No.
And my other question is, for teaching, like for on Zoom, we're on Zoom right now.
Yes.
And so you can click and put your screens up, your slides, and talk about them, and then you can take them down. And I see you, and you have a whiteboard in the back, and I have a whiteboard, so you could actually use it as part of your lectures as well.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. You can come to my whiteboard. I can stand up. I can move around. All of this stuff. If you're recording it, is no problem. For sure, you can do all sorts of things. And we've been playing around actually with turning this whiteboard into a green screen. And actually projecting the slides there, bringing the webcam closer. We don't know yet if we're going to do that because it may actually not be necessary. But yeah, for sure. If you can figure out ways of using your room, then yeah. So what I've got that really helps, I see some of you have it and some of you don't, is a bit of a wider angle video camera. So this one is 110 degrees. Most of them are a little bit narrower. And what it means is it creates a bit of a fisheye effect, but it kind of opens up my room a little bit more, so that if we were going to use this space, it would be a little bit less awkward. Yeah.
So just got the whiteboard behind you, so maybe it's just my computer the way that I can see it.
Yeah.
For example, blurry. Like I wouldn't be able to read.
No.
I can't read words.
It's not straight on though, right?
Yeah. So we'd have to